Whether it be building houses or growing vegetables, Masa is still doing the same thing he did in Japan. The only difference now is that he's doing it in a different world. In a rural village in the country, Masa wipes off his sweat after finishing his stocking duties, only to be handed a list of other jobs to accomplish. He questions if handling the tasks really does fall under his responsibilities, but such is the life of a rural home center guy. A home center is typically a retail store that sells everyday goods and necessities, at least that's how it should be. It's different when you're in the countryside. From orders and deliveries, to just about meeting every single request under the sun, including machinery repairs, gardening and landscape care, construction, surveying, and pretty much everything a customer could possibly need. Thanks to that, employees rarely get any days off, almost like in a black company. But when Masa sees the villagers' grateful smiles, he's reminded that he never once considered it bad work, at least not until today. He's finishing up with another all-nighter, thinking about how old his body has gotten. Suddenly, his vision began to blur. Everything turned white, and it felt completely out of the norm. Right when he was about to collapse, an off force swallowed him up, and then he felt his body arrive at a different place. He had no idea where he was, as everything around him was white, and even his clothes had become so baggy, as if his body shrunk completely. Right as he screamed in confusion, a voice came out to congratulate him for his grand selection. A woman appears in the sky, gracefully descending to greet him. The goddess Mari says he's going to be reincarnated into a fantasy world, filled with magic and beasts. With his destiny sealed, she asks to bring him over to this world. Masa groaned as he opened his eyes. Instead of his usual alarm, the sound of a woman's voice woke him up, but to his confusion, he saw a couple of bunny ears. He jolted up, fully awake from surprise and unexpected encounter. With curiosity getting the best of him, he reached out and touched the ears, confirming that they're real, soft, and warm. The girl backed away, feeling infringed on by the contact. Apologizing, he then asks to know who the bunny-eared lady is, so she corrects him, saying she's actually a lapine with real ears. Despite his shock, he stood from the encounter with the rabbit folk. He wasn't in a dream like he expected, and was actually transported to the other world, Alstaicha, like the goddess said. It was a vast and green land. However, it was more problematic than enchanting. Starting from zero in a different world was too hardcore that he began panicking. May watched him mumbling to himself, and froze as he suddenly turned to stare at her. He then asks if she could take him to where she lives. Truth be told, he doesn't really have anywhere to go, so he needs a big favor. Unfortunately, he's a human, and the others would be mad if she brought him alone. According to their adults, humans are cruel beings, who don't like anyone that isn't human. Just like in mangas and games, his kind must indulge in slavery or the likes. Still, he asks the girl to talk to them for him. Their conversation is interrupted, as they feel something coming from behind. Approaching them with a sinister smile was a hobgoblin nearly steaming with power. It's so strong that it takes a whole group of adults to beat one. Since it's covered in scars, it must be one that was separated from its pack. She pulled on Masa's arm, saying they have to run away now, even tearing up as she desperately tried to convince him. However, this has the opposite effect. Instead of retreating, he affirms his resolve and pushes her behind him, telling May to run away while he keeps the monster busy. If it really is that dangerous, he can't have it following her back to her town. She tries to warn him about what might happen if he fights, but he already knows that, and nonetheless tells her to just go already. The young man sighs while she left, not knowing what he was even doing. After seeing her troubled face, there was no other choice but to protect her. Adrenaline was pumping as he urged the monster to come at him. It does as requested and swings its hammer at the young man, and it's strong enough to wreck the ground he was standing on. Even though the hit didn't land, he was still pushed far away. The goblin smiled, as if mocking his weak body. He was frustrated, and thought about how he just needed one ability to have a chance. Feeling like he has no other choice, Masa threw something at the enemy. A water bottle hit the goblin's face, and Masa looked at the thin recyclable plastic in disbelief. The monster couldn't help but laugh at his pitiful attempt to save himself. With its terrifying smile, he knew that it was all over. However, it suddenly slipped on the bottle as it was stepping forward. Before the young man could even make sense of it, the enemy's head hit a rock, knocking it out cold. He actually chuckles and acts like someone filing a police report on the street. A hand appeared out of a portal and smacked his face, asking what he was doing. She says she summoned him near a peaceful human village, so why was he so far out? Now, he's being mauled by goblins and already playing with death on his first day. To his surprise, he sees Mari angrily looking down at him, questioning why he wasn't using all the strong skills she gave him. The day before the reincarnation, the two were talking about moving to another world. Because of a god losing a bet with her, he's been assigned to a world she manages. Confirming his identity, she one-sidedly goes on about his new age, job, and skills when he butts in to bring up his own concerns. He still doesn't believe it's true, but it unfortunately is, and he has no option of refusing. The shock of reality hits him. As an all-knowing goddess, she understands that doing this blindly must be nerve-wracking. To ease his mind, she's prepared her personal blessings and offers him 3 skill-granting vouchers. This is something he's familiar with, and comparable to abilities in the games he likes playing. While she was starting to push through with the process, a hand appeared out of a portal and firmly grabbed her shoulder. Hesty gave a chilling smile, telling the Mari to give him 8 vouchers. Her skin crawled as the elder goddess said that she must have misspoken for some reason. With this, the troublemaker daughter is borrowed for a moment, since they have something to discuss. Normally, the ones who made the bet should be the ones apologizing, but Hesty was going to do it herself. Her husband, Zeus, and their child caused trouble, which she's sorry for. Masa recognizes their names as the ones from Greek mythology. When enforcing divine contracts, they can only help the chosen soul by granting blessings. They can bestow things like local language, but once they descend, gods can no longer intervene. What's more, the daughter was only going to give 3 tickets instead of 8, intending to take some for herself. He scowls at her in anger, but Mari acts like a child who can't hear her faults. Moving on, they summon a skill slot machine. They'll be using this divine tool, since they can't give him anything specifically. There's a rule that doing 10 pulls grants 1 extra spin. Hesty gets a great idea and grants him 2 more tickets from Zeus and Mari as an apology. The daughter has no power to object, so she just emphasizes how much of a blessing it is to receive 11 skills. Brushing it off, he excitedly starts the 11 skill pull series. The first thing he gets is a level 3 appraisal. What comes next is a level 4 stonecraft. It all seems common, but the goddesses confirm that his luck is great, so a few nice ones should appear. However, he continues to get a bunch of plain abilities like dismantling, mining, and leathercraft. As the pulls went on, he gets a fairly high-level dimensional storage box, blacksmithing, alchemy, healing magic, and deforestation. Masa's luck stats are absurdly high, but his skill levels are pitiful. Lastly, he gets the extremely rare map skill that shows him the area within a 3-kilometer radius. His eyes seemed to water, as life was basically telling him to be a carpenter. With that said, his skill assignment is over, and it's time to descend to his new world. He's snapped awake from the memory. A skill ticket is only created when a god and mortal bears a child, and he used 10 of them. He reasons that he had no way of fighting with the skills he has, but Mari is in no mood for excuses. She reminds him that he isn't on Earth anymore, and has to do something with the goblin. The young man is handed the monster's heavy and spiked club, told that it's kill or be killed out there. If he wants to live, he has to face reality with his heart and accept it. For now, the best option is to end things with 1 clean blow. When he does as told, she commends and tells him to check his status screen. Masa is annoyed by how much she's rushing, but obeys her anyway. He calls for his status screen with his mind, and they see that he's leveled up from the experience through the fight. With the valuable lesson, she moves to heal him up and teleport him to a nearby village, but he suddenly stops her, saying he met a girl just a few moments ago. She's surprised, not expecting there to be a human so far out in the woods, so he explains that the girl is actually part of a rabbit folk tribe. As Mari urgently insists that he has to help her return to her village safely, a hand grabbed her. She turned back in frustration, demanding to know who it is, and is met with Hesty's chilling glare, telling the goddess to stop interfering with humans. The young one is dragged back into the portal, and Masa is encouraged to live as he pleases in a brand new world. Right when they disappeared, a familiar voice called to him. It was May, returning with a bunch of adults who were armed to help him out. He smiles at the girl, crying as she embraces him, saying he made it through in one piece. Her kin then thanks him sincerely for putting himself in danger to protect a stranger. They get back to work and ask about the goblin, so the human just points to the spot where its body lay. Everyone stared in shock, unable to believe that he beat it on his own. As usual, he sheepishly laughs it off, saying he was lucky enough that it got into an accident. The situation was ridiculous, but the more pressing matter for him is where he was going to stay. Fortunately, they talked about this on the way, and agreed to welcome someone in need. His eyes beamed with hope and gratitude. Opening their home to someone who risked his life to protect May is no big deal at all. The first thing he needs to do is meet their chief. Everything happened so fast earlier, so they didn't have time to talk. Now, May finally introduces herself properly, but the image of her calling him her big brother makes his heart tingle. As his reaction makes her worry, he says he just never expected that anything like this would happen. It's his turn now, so he extends his hand and introduces himself with a smile. There are a lot of doubts in his mind, and he isn't even sure of what he can do. Either way, his free life in another world begins from there on out. Masa was a 36-year-old hardware clerk, until he went on his way home one day. A goddess named Mari summoned him without any warning or regard for his situation, and he was reincarnated to another world. Despite getting 11 divine tickets, he didn't receive any useful combat skills, and to top it off, he was immediately attacked by a goblin in the woods. He honestly thought that he was done for, but because of a fateful encounter, he was brought to the rabbit folk village. From the entrance alone, he sees a fairly wide and bare settlement, but that didn't make it any less mesmerizing to the otherworlder. People stared as he walked through the village as a human. There are only a handful of residents, but they all help each other to get by. As such, May would be so happy if he thinks of everyone there as part of his family. He's grateful, but couldn't help but notice that the defensive fence was just a bunch of logs tied together. Considering the houses as well, the civilization felt like it was in the Stone Age. Told that it's been just 2 years since they set things up, Masa thinks about how tough they must be having it. They reach a larger-looking hut, which is where he'll be greeting the village chief. He's led inside and sees Toro arranging a bunch of arrows on the ground. Fortunately, the head greets him with warmth, already having heard of him. He doubted his own ears when he first heard the news about the human that day. The chief looked pretty young despite his position. Masa bows and thanks them for being so accommodating to him. If they hadn't taken him in, he'd probably be eaten out in the woods. On the contrary, Toro says they're more grateful that he risked his life to protect May. With that said, he formally welcomes the young man into their village. It might feel too fast, but for the time being, he'll have to stay at the child's house. Her father died at a young age, so she and her mother are looking for an extra pair of hands. While he doesn't personally mind, he worries about it being uncomfortable for someone her age, but she says he's more than welcome to be part of their home. Again, he's extremely grateful for their hospitality. Since the sun is already setting, he can focus on settling in, and they can talk about village matters tomorrow without worrying about things. They're being so kind to him, and he wonders if there's anything he can do as an outsider to repay them. Right as Masa was walking out of the chief's hut, he remembers his old life as a hardware store clerk. Thinking about all the experiences in his previous life, the divine skills granted by the goddesses, and the current state of the settlement, something important clicks in his mind. It felt unfortunate at first, but he realized that there was something he could do for everyone. He loudly and urgently calls to the chief, repeatedly saying that he found the perfect thing he can offer. With that said, he still needs their permission. He asks the chief if they'd allow him to make improvements to the village. It was a bold and daring proposition, especially from an outsider who just got there. He emphasizes how he can step in to improve the houses and general living conditions. Toro puts his excited feelings on hold for the time being. While he's certain that the human isn't speaking on a whim, he sternly reminds him to be mindful of the situation. People would naturally get nervous if a guest who just arrived suddenly wants to remodel their homes. This is true, and he understands that trust takes time to build. However, he's already noticed the problem and can't just let it be. Without safety, none of it matters, and everyone will just keep getting hurt all the time. Given their situation, they can't afford to delay preparations due to fear of an outsider. Masa was as nosy in his old life, but he's someone who can't sit still without giving it his all. As such, he fervently wishes to do what he can to help the village that took him in. Even if he messes up, he promises to fix things one way or another. Such is the conviction he developed while working at a hardware store in the countryside. Respecting his passion and determination, Toro asks about the first thing he wants to tackle. After all, it's obvious in his eyes just how serious and sincere he is. The chief also agrees that the village needs improvement and that they've also talked about it. Thanking him for the trust, Masa says he'd like to start with what stands out the most. It was easier said than done, but nonetheless, he gets to work by first checking his skill list again. What he'll be capable of will be someone dependent on the abilities he received. There are some he's never seen, likely developed innately. Since there are so many, he decides to test everything out one by one. With bright eyes, he appraises a hatchet and sees a detailed description of the tool. Amazed by the quality, he makes sure to be careful not to break what he borrowed. The skills seem to work without any prior experience needed. Scrolling through the list, he looks for other things that might be useful. Masa sees a wood-cutting skill that doesn't need a tool among his abilities. He walked up to a tree, skeptical but eager to try it out. Merely putting his hand out, he feels something happen, but doubts his eyes as he doesn't see anything change. To his surprise, the tree falls to one side, cut completely clean from its base. Aside from it nearly falling on him, the skill consumed a sixth of his mana. That's the cost of using a level 1 skill, but there doesn't seem to be any issues. For the time being, farming and blacksmithing are unneeded, so he sets his eyes on a processing type of abilities. Among his list is masonry, which looks useful for his current task. Like before, he doesn't need any tools to make it work, so he goes ahead and takes a stone from the ground, intending to turn it into a cube. It changes shape in the blink of an eye. The surface is rough, and it took 1/10 of his mana, so it might be affected by the size. Next up, he'll dry the wood he just cut down, with the perfect skill for just that purpose. Since the level is the same with masonry, he can compare the efficiency of the two. He wants to use the tree trunk as a major material later on, but he still has to remove the moisture. It'd normally take years without any tools, or months with costly equipment. However, it looks like the skill will allow him to do it in an instant. Giving it a try, he holds his hand out just like earlier. The sun was about to set, and May was in the woods fetching Masa for dinner. To her surprise, she sees him on the ground, passed out with a log on top of him. He was clearly in worse shape than when he fought the hobgoblin. This must be the mana depletion people talk about, and he must have overexerted himself. That said, there was almost no distortion in his work, and he managed to turn the wood into usable lumber. While he's ashamed of passing out, it was time for dinner. They head back to May's house, and he meets the child's mother for the first time. She introduces herself as Lulu, and asks that he be comfortable in their home. As usual, the child goes on and on about how he saved her from a hobgoblin. It was time for the welcome party, so everyone took a seat. Their home might not be lavish, but it'll keep out wind and rain enough to be called his home. Again, their kindness knows no bounds. Thanks to the hospitality of the rabbit folk, it seems like he'll be able to manage in this new world. From there on out, he'll be sure to do his best and start living life to the fullest. He has no idea how much he'll be able to repay the debt he has to them, but he'll do everything he can, with all the might in his body. Tomorrow, he'll be starting with the village's home improvement plan. It was finally time to improve the village, so Masa gathered a bunch of important people at the entrance, where everything was going to start. The first order of business is reinforcing the fences defending their home. After the chief told everyone about him helping out, people have been buzzing with excitement. They ask why he's choosing to start with the fences of all places. No matter what project, safety comes first, and a wooden wall won't keep monsters out. From the base up to a set height, Masa is thinking of making it out of stone. There's a lot of material from a nearby cliff, and it'll surely be much sturdier from the front. One worries that they don't have the manpower to haul that much rock to the gates, but he says it'll be a fine, even if they need to surround the entire village. After all, he and May already hauled and brought everything necessary this morning. He releases tons of stones and boulders from his dimensional storage box skill. With that, bringing things over won't be a problem for them at all, but people are still shocked that he even has that skill in his arsenal. Misunderstandings and rumors start to brew from this alone. From the start, it already did feel like one of the rarer skills that he rolled in the slots, so he decides to keep it under wraps. Moving on, they now have to help each other stack the stones on top of each other. A couple of villagers got to work, but are immediately stopped by the project leader. If they just pile things up, the wall will collapse with barely any force applied to it. There's a proper way of doing it, and he'll clearly give everyone an example. Masa handles an entire portion on his own and shows everyone. The main difference is the size and order of the stones they used, as it generally affects integrity. It's okay from the front, but the depth is what actually matters when considering strength. They'll want to focus on maximizing the surface area touching each other. By increasing this, they can get a tighter fit that's harder to damage or move around. Just changing the way they're stacked makes a huge difference in the quality of the wall. He also has a trick for when their settlement grows. When building the outer layer of stones, they can use backfill, which is something even castle walls use. The inside is lined with large stones and filled with smaller ones that'll help the rainwater pass easily, allowing the sturdy fence weather rains without much trouble. That's more advanced stuff, and they can just focus on the simpler things for now. Ready to give it their best shot, he takes the lead and encourages everyone to follow his steps. Masa is acting all high and mighty now, but laughs as his bosses always used to scold him. Just then, someone else called to him, asking for a moment to talk. It's the women of the village, who were told that he could make cooking and boiling much easier. He heard that they usually cook and prepare the meals for the entire village, and that they do so over open flames, which is why he wants to build a stove. They sharply, almost threateningly, ask if that'll come after the fence work, and he realizes that this wasn't a request, but a demand from the people commanding the kitchen. On any kind of site, he knew that making them mad would be dangerous. As such, he obediently promises to build the stoves alongside the fence, allowing him to barely avoid a huge conflict and please them instead. Later on, Masa meets with the women in the plaza. He will be handling the stonework for the stoves himself, but still needs their cooperation. They're eager to do anything they can, and ask if he needs anything aside from stone. To start things out, he asks them to gather other materials they'll be using, mainly clay, grass, and sand. He'll pack them in the gaps between the stone, leading to a stronger structure. The grass and sand will be mixed together with the clay, acting as binders and preventing it from becoming too brittle. May is assigned to lead the task, so she goes ahead to help everyone out. Meanwhile, Masa doubles down and tells everyone, to let him know if they need anything else. Since he asked, they requested deep wooden bowls and utensils for eating. That won't cost too much mana, so he even throws in tables and chairs for everyone, as all of that would be helpful and easily doable with his crafting skills. Although it'll take a few days to complete, he promises to make it happen with time. They could even build a covered plaza that allow them to cook even when the weather is bad. His confidence and ideas surprise them. Not only is he intelligent, they're also impressed by his amazing craftsmanship. He sheepishly says that it isn't much, and are things he learned from his old work. This piques their curiosity even more, and they wonder what he used to do exactly. Truth be told, he just did everything that needed to be done, which was grueling work in itself. It wasn't anything special, just endless tasks that were constantly tough on his body. As it's all in the past, he excitedly encourages everyone to start building what's at hand. It was tiring as the days were filled with carrying heavy rocks. Fortunately, it was fulfilling to do things together with the villagers. Soon enough, even the houses started to be improved from simple huts to wooden structures. The bowls and utensils were also completed in no time, and he even began teaching them cultivation techniques. At one point, they took interest in the chopsticks that Masa was using on his own. It was always hot and tiring to work, but progress was constantly being made, and the rabbit folk village soon looked nothing like it did before he arrived. Standing amid all this was Toro, who couldn't believe how much his beloved home changed. He couldn't help but smile. After a few days, they all breathed a sigh of triumph, as the solid stone barricade now stood tall to protect their home. Every one of them cheered with a mixture of pride and surprise that they built it themselves. Right as they were celebrating, a sharp voice called, telling them to stop and come quickly, as dinner was ready. The covered plaza was bustling as the entire village ate dinner together. It was much more comfortable now, especially with the new stove burning hot. Masa is glad that they liked it. While it's a shame that the forks aren't being used much, it's nice that they like the chopsticks. Just then, the chief spots him mingling with the others. Toro thanks him for all the work he's done, but the human insists that they all helped make it happen. Words aren't enough to express their gratitude, but sincerity is all they can offer him at this point. May ran to hug him tight, joyful that the village is once again thriving because of him. He couldn't be happier. The sight of his happy face played in the Hall of the Gods, where the two goddesses watched things work out well, even without Mari's interference. She argues that she wasn't wrong at all, and that he's just lucky with how it ended up. The young man has 11 skills, so it's only natural for her to worry, but he went ahead and got even more skills all on his own. Simply speaking, he's an anomaly among humans, and both of them noticed from the start. Most people are born with a couple of gifts, but he's different. Hesti praises her husband for choosing such an interesting human to summon. The world's civilization and culture barely developed for 10 whole years. Masa has been there for just a while, but he was already serving as the key and catalyst to change all that. The young man really was something else. They can now live comfortably safely, although he insists that this is still just the beginning. At one point, they might even build brick houses and call themselves a proper town. He doesn't want to bring it up, but the most important thing to him are the toilets, as doing it outside is getting old. Since they're in a fantasy world anyway, he gets an idea and says he has something to ask everyone. He wonders if there are any slimes in the nearby areas. There's a colony by the cliff, but they're dangerous creatures that dissolve everything. Masa smiled as these are the exact conditions he was hoping to get. The village eventually has to discuss sanitation and hygiene. If they're going to get serious, they'll need materials, at least for a dirt floor. To do that, they'll need some gravel, slaked lime, and murky water, so he asks everyone if there's an ocean near the village. It suddenly grows completely cold and silent. He has no idea why the energy shifted. May confirms that the sea is nearby, and that they actually came running from that direction, which is where they used to live. May reveals that they escaped from the ocean. The rabbit man adds that they were driven out by the humans and starts to cry. Feeling their anguish, Masa can't help but feel disgusted by the turn of events. They were persecuted by humans, and yet the rabbit folk accepted him in their home wholeheartedly. To break the tension, he asks if he made the wood table awkward. He adds that if they want to make the settlement better, they need the materials that can only be obtained by the coast. Still, the place where they came from must mean the world to them. Sadly, he can't just drag them back there, so he is thinking of going alone to the sea. However, the next morning, he is surprised that May tagged along secretly. He tells her that she can't go with him since the journey might pose a danger to her. He adds that he only beat the hobgoblin because the beast tripped himself. It will be tricky if a horde of goblins were to attack them and they need to fight. She at least needs to duel with the beasts. The older rabbit chimes in and agrees that joining the expedition will be dangerous for her since she doesn't have enough experience on the battlefield. Upon seeing the village's chief, Masa feels grateful that he came to see him off. The old man gives him an armor to help him protect himself during his journey. He requests that if Masa ever sees surviving demi-humans in their old village, tell them that they are safe and thriving in their new land. Masa agrees to his request and assures him to pass his message. Silently, he also thinks of investigating the situation of the remaining beast folk in the area. With this, he also entrusts May, Lulu, and others to the chief. He looks at the rabbit girl with fondness in his eyes. The young rabbit cries as he bids goodbye and tells her to behave and be a good girl while he is away. After making all the necessary preparations, he leaves the settlement. On the 4th day of his journey, he starts running and feels the rush of the wind and scenery just flying by. He doesn't feel the tiredness in his body and has been mapping his destination using his map skill. At some point, he sees the ocean while the sun is setting. Along the way, he runs into various monsters that he manages to slay easily. As he goes on with his journey, a group of men whose carriage stumbled over asks for help. He agrees to help them, but little does he know that the men were bandits ready to attack him. He fights all of them and in the end, defeats the bandits. Compared to the hobgoblin he ran into earlier, the group were nothing but a joke and he knocked all of them with the club he had picked. He was about to strike the bandit again and remembered the words of the goddess that evil humans should be taught a lesson. Despite this, he uses his healing magic and heals the wounds he inflicted. He couldn't quite bring himself to leave them with worse injuries. In exchange of letting them live, he gets their loot and the weapon he wanted the most. It was a win-win deal. While he was continuing his journey, the map suddenly reacted, and it led him to the seaside town he was looking for. He wonders if this was the town where May and the others lived in. With this, he readies his things before heading to the village. From a distance, he can see the watchtower from the distance being completely abandoned. As he walks further, it looks like the place was attacked and ransacked. Getting closer to the village, he is shocked to see a group of goblins in the middle of a raid. They all shift their attention to him and lunge at him. He drops his bag and retrieves his sword from his vault. He studies them closely and figures that they were hobgoblins too, but the weaker ones. He then draws his sword and swings it against the goblins. He easily strikes the enemies with the sword he got from the bandits. With this, he can finally use his only combat skill, which is the swordsmanship level 1. No magic, this is the technique he developed by himself and not from the system. Back in school, he discovered that he has talent in kendo and so now, he can easily use its basics to fight. He showcases his prowess in kendo and strikes the goblins. Seeing them fall one by one, he is confident that he can finish them all using the sword he got. Then, out of nowhere, a boar with a goblin riding it is rushing in his direction. Masa is fighting with the boss of the pack. The beast rushes towards him, and he braces himself for the impact. He gets sent flying on the ground, but gets back up immediately. The beast rushes towards him again. Running out of breath, he must find a way to deal with the goblin controlling the boar. Additionally, it is hard for him to reach the goblin with his sword while it is mounted on the boar, and getting close to his target means getting blown away by the insane charge speed of the boar. It feels like he is in a traffic accident. Just then, Masa realizes something. The boar is like a speeding car which will have a hard time braking when in momentum. With this realization, he activates his storage space and retrieves a large log and uses it to prevent the boss from attacking him again. The impact of the lumber causes the goblin to get thrown from the boar. This gives Masa a chance to finish the job and impale his sword into the beast's chest. He grabs his sword and pushes himself to wrap the fight up. He then rushes towards the remaining goblins who all try to escape from him to seek reinforcement. He panics, thinking it will be harder for him to deal with them when this happens. Just then, a barrage of arrows shoots in the direction of the running goblins. The Knights of Greatest Kingdom arrive offering him help. One of the knights demands to know his identity, but since he is still reeling from the fight, he wasn't able to focus and failed to answer the question. Impatient, the man screams at him. Another knight chimes in, apologizing on behalf of his subordinate. He introduces himself as Smith, the captain of the unit, and he is there for the goblin slaying quest. However, it looks like they are already late since Masa managed to deal with the goblins by himself, which is incredible. Masa thanks them for saving him. He finally introduces himself and shares that he has been traveling in search of resources. It dawns on him that the knights are the ones guarding the territory. Meanwhile, Smith figures out that maybe Masa knows something about the rabbit folk. However, the problem is how they are going to get the information from him. He finds it impressive that the young man managed to defeat the boss of the pack on his own. He then carries the conversation to find out if Masa is from the nearby village. Asking other private details like his age, occupation, and if he is a skill wielder, Smith then straightforwardly asks if he wants to join the knights. Masa pauses, understanding now that they want to recruit him. He declines his offer, mentioning that he has a debt of gratitude that he must fulfill first and going on a journey because of it. Impressed, Smith taps him aggressively on his back, commending him for his noble goal, unlike those knights who only care about money, women, and fame. The young man then asks where the old folks of the place go. The knight answers that they are taking refuge at the nearby village because of the goblin attack. Since the problem is solved, they can now call them back. Before calling them back, Masa suggests to dispose of the goblin corpses first and asks if the man would be willing to help him. Smith seems clueless, so he explains that if they leave the carcasses in an open field, it might attract other beasts. Aside from this, if they rot, they can cause disease, so that's why they should dig a hole, burn the corpses, and bury them. The knights start to help and gather the corpses. It makes Masa think that the level of the civilization on the town side is not very high, because they let the corpses of beasts rot in the open field. He leads the way and finds the perfect area to bury the corpses. He then spots a hidden space behind and checks it, surprised by what he saw. Meanwhile, Hesti is shocked by the progress of Masa and asks Mari to rewind the scenes from the start. They saw how the man defeated the goblin boss while riding the boar. Hesti asks for Masa's information they have on file. She reads that he was top 8 in the national kendo tournament when he was in 9th grade. He was a runner-up in the boxing prefectural tournament in high school. She wonders if those achievements are normal for those chosen to be reincarnated. They wonder if something happened when Zeus modified his body for reincarnation. Masa isn't meant to have combat prowess, but right now it seems like he can fight beasts as well aside from building. Mari seems relieved to hear this, but Hesti points out that it is a dangerous situation since Masa can overthrow the balance of their world. Additionally, if they leave things as they are, there is a possibility that Mari can vanish. Back in the village, the people thank Smith and his knights for saving their village. Because of them, they are now back in their homes and resume their daily lives. However, he clarifies that Masa was the one who dealt with the goblins himself, so, in return, they would like to hand him a reward as a token of gratitude for the bravery he showed. Masa hesitates at first but accepts it later on. Smith then looks at the village chief, Garv, and asks if he can provide the reward. Garv looks conflicted since their village is poor, so any payment beyond the nightly service where they are currently exempt from will be hard for them to provide. Masa has another thing in mind aside from money. He clarifies that he is much more interested to receive wooden crates or water jars. Smith is shocked that is all he wants. The young man confirms, saying that he needs them to transport seawater and shellfish. Smith remembers that he came to the village to look for materials and asks if he is still completing them. Masa confirms again and reiterates that he needs materials for earthen walls. Smith looks at the chief and points out that what Masa is asking for sounds like a bargain for saving their whole village from the goblins. However, Garv pauses for a bit. He states that he can provide wooden crates, but water jars are a necessity for those who are living by the sea. Masa can see that the chief just doesn't want to give him the right reward he deserves. He chimes in and tells him that his village doesn't have to worry about water and storing them since they have a well near the fields. Garv is surprised that he knows about the hidden well. Masa admits that he found the source of water by chance in the clearing at the end of the narrow path. Because of this, the chief is immediately captured by the knights for hiding the source of water for his own personal gain. All this time, they thought that the water was scarce in the village, but it turns out that the chief is just selfishly having illicit gains. Masa is about to go on his way when the villagers try to stop him. They demand accountability from him since they don't know how to survive without their leader. Confused, he tells them that their chief was the one who should be blamed. However, they still refuse to let him go and even try to attack him. As a retaliation, he hits the man on the face. The others try to strike him down as well, but he overpowers everyone who tries to hurt him. Later, Smith sees the result of the brawl. Masa lightly tells him that villagers suddenly attacked, so he needed to take action. They were easier than goblins. Smith points out that he went overboard in an already chaotic situation. He then shifts his attention to the chief, asking if he is behind the attack. It looks like he planned to kill Masa and then silence the knights as well. With this, he holds the chief accountable for the attack on Masa. According to the law, he will be sent to slavery. Hearing this, the chief begs for mercy. Being a slave is as good as being handed over a death sentence, and he can't accept it. Masa smiles after seeing his reaction. He tells everyone that he is willing to forget what happened, and this will make the sentence effectively lighter. They would still serve time, but this would not make their lives a living hell. The chief asks what he needs to do to be forgiven. Masa replies that he needs to answer his questions. First, 2 years ago, didn't the land they are dwelling on belong to the rabbit folk? He then bravely asks what they did to the rabbit folk to drive them away from their home. The chief grits his teeth in anger and tells Smith to put the young man in his place. However, the knight doesn't side with him and instead asks if he is guilty of it. Just then, a knight named Eldo places himself before the chief, shielding him from Masa. The man is surprised by the knight's move, who then asks why he is so invested to dig an issue that was already from 2 years ago. Masa then reveals that he owes the rabbit folk a great deal. Looking at them, Masa can tell that Eldo and Garv are hiding something, and he is determined to dig it up. Seeing how resolute Masa is about learning what happened to the rabbit folk, Eldo decides to tell the truth. The man looks strong anyway and seems like the type who would force the truth out of him sooner or later. 5 years ago, when the new king had just ascended the throne, he sought to expand the kingdom. Because of this ambition, the surrounding villages and settlements were conquered. One of those villages belonged to the rabbit folk. Eldo and Garv were tasked with conquering it. They succeeded, forcing the rabbit folk to flee their homeland, which was then absorbed into the kingdom. As a reward, Eldo was promoted to knight, and Garv was appointed village chief. In the end, it was the kingdom's greed that swallowed the rabbit folk's land. They further revealed that rabbit folk captured during the war were taken as prisoners and enslaved. Worse still, they were subjected to humiliation and forced to live with their heads hung low in shame. Enraged, Masa demands that they release the demi-humans. Smith tries to pacify him, urging him to calm down. He understands Masa's frustration but explains that the slaves are now considered property and cannot be released so easily. Using that logic, Masa asks if beating them and enslaving them himself would make them his property as well. Smith points out that his reasoning is flawed. Masa spits back that it was that same absurd logic which allowed them to enslave demi-humans in the first place. Smith explains that the situation is beyond their authority and that slavery is permitted by the kingdom's law. Boiling with rage, Masa screams, asking if it is truly acceptable to enslave such kind people. He forbids them from speaking of equality and law when they are nothing more than murderers. After venting his anger, Masa apologizes for being overwhelmed by his emotions. He gives them time to think about what they plan to do moving forward. As he walks away, a portal suddenly opens and a hand reaches out, slapping him hard across the face. Shocked, he sees the goddess, who immediately pulls him into the portal. She laments that she brought him into this world to help develop the country, yet now he is picking fights with its leaders. She fears that his actions could put both of them in danger. Masa rebuts that he was dragged into this world without his consent, which cost him the chance to ever see the woman he loved again. The goddess is affected by his words but still tells him that his behavior was unacceptable. Masa backs down, admitting that he could not possibly fight an entire country alone. However, Mari's expression tells a different story. He tells her to reveal her secret, as she is clearly hiding something. She tries to walk away, but he grabs her hand, still demanding answers. She yanks her hand free, then finally gives in. With a worried expression, she tells him that he can wage war against a country if he truly wants to. Masa is confused by her claim of how strong he is. Mari explains that during his reincarnation, she adjusted his body to handle magic. This was a result of sending him to another world. Because of this, his mana efficiency has drastically improved. His current mana recovery rivals that of a great spirit, and if used irresponsibly, it could lead to disaster. Masa remains unconvinced, saying that he does not feel anything unusual within his body. The goddess replies that while he may not sense it, his mana is overwhelming. To be specific, even when he runs, his stamina barely depletes. His mana is also far easier to manipulate, and his physical strength exceeds what his stats suggest. Hearing this, Masa realizes that all these examples have already happened to him before. He assumed it was normal after reincarnating, but now he understands that it was abnormal. The goddess agrees and adds that while his level is still low, his power will skyrocket as his magic level increases over time. Masa finally understands and comments that she went overboard with modifying his body. She apologizes with a regretful expression, then vanishes without another word, leaving Masa behind in confusion. The next morning, Masa meets Smith, who informs him that the demi-humans from the village will be released. However, they cannot liberate demi-humans from other settlements, since Smith lacks authority outside his jurisdiction. Masa then asks about the status of demi-humans in other areas. Smith reveals that there are records of demi-humans kept in the city. With this information, Masa plans to head to the city and ask the authorities about the whereabouts of the other demi-humans. Noticing Smith's strange expression, Masa asks if something is wrong. Smith denies it, saying he is simply glad to be of help. Masa warns that if negotiations fail, he will resolve the matter by force. Smith urgently asks him not to do that, explaining that he arranged the meeting to avoid conflict. A carriage soon arrives to take them to the city. As Masa approaches it, he asks what kind of city they are heading to. Smith replies that they are going to the city of knights, Portalum. As they draw closer, Masa cannot help but marvel at how developed the city is. Smith agrees, adding that while it may not rival the fortress city, its defenses are second to none. He can't help but compare the city of knights to the fishing village, which lacks basic knowledge and hygiene. The city of knights also reeks of beast corpses. It seems like this is the standard for their world, and this extremely bothers him. In another thought, this might be a sign that freeing the beasts will be possible. Meanwhile, the knights see him laughing weirdly alone, which seems alarming. They are now heading to the council, and since they are meeting the leader of the city for the negotiation, he will have to verify his identity at the gate. Smith requests that he have his guild card ready so the guards could check. Masa suddenly looks nervous. When they arrived at Portalim's Adventurers Guild, Smith scolded him for not having a guild card. He compares the young man to a slacker since he was supposed to get the card when he turned 12. More than embarrassment, Masa is just glad that his secret as a reincarnated soul isn't revealed because of his lack of guild card. The receptionist of the guild welcomes him and instructs him to put his hands over the magic tool in front of him. He is amazed by how it will automatically generate the guild card. The receptionist explains that guild cards are a technology bestowed by the gods. She reminds him that fraud or forgery will be punished. She also adds that personal information can be kept private, but his name, registered guild, and criminal record cannot be hidden. Furthermore, the information is only used for identity verification and cannot be accessed by others unless the holder is deceased. Masa is quite shocked that their privacy protection is top-notch, since he didn't expect it. After the process, she hands him his guild card. When he receives it, the two knights behind him seem excited to see his stats. He carefully studies it and commands it to display his details. He nonchalantly views his card and thinks that it is simply like the status screen but in print. Meanwhile, the two knights are incredulous by how many skills are enumerated in his card. He tries to hide his skills, but it is too late now. The shocked knights talk behind him out of disbelief. Normally, an adventurer would just have 1 or 2 skills, but the young man has more titles on his card than they have ever seen before. Masa tells them to keep his secret and let it slide. The two agree. Not knowing how to make sense of his skill set as well, they discuss how they would make a believable story to tell the leader of the city. They need to make their story straight about his background or else they would be busted and punished for lying. Later, they finally arrive at the city hall where the meeting will be held. The receptionist welcomes them and tells them to head to conference room 1 for Masa's meeting. After getting permitted to enter the hall, they all feel relieved but also feel the pressure of being questioned. As they walk towards the meeting room, Smith explains that Masa will be meeting the representative of the city, which is the Grand Master of the Knights. Normally, this kind of meeting would be impossible, but the leader finds Masa interesting, so he agreed. They finally arrive at the room and are granted entry. Masa then meets the ruler, Lance. He can immediately feel that his presence is on a whole different level from the other knights. From this, he can say that this negotiation isn't going to be easy. He walks forward to the leader and thanks him for granting him an audience. However, Lance tells him to cut the small talk since he has been briefed about his agenda of wanting to free the demi-humans. Straightforwardly, Lance tells him that with this kind of request, he must have something valuable to trade. Judging by his demeanor, he doesn't plan on using money to talk. He is curious what Masa has in store to offer him. Masa quietly observes the ruler in front of him, who seems so calm and quite difficult to read. Without dirty tactics up his sleeve, Masa decides to show his hand since this will be the biggest deal since the city was founded. Calmly and in all seriousness, Masa states that his offer to the city is his vast knowledge. Lance is in disbelief by his vague offer and demands him to elaborate for everyone to understand. Masa explains that with his knowledge, he will lower the death rate and improve sanitation and food supplies. Furthermore, he will increase jobs to improve productivity and living standards. If allowed, it would be great if they start with the carriages because he noticed how bumpy the ride was. The carriages lack spring mechanisms to absorb the shock and make the ride smoother. He offers to make them carriages that are more comfortable and efficient with his advanced knowledge. He also adds that their horses shouldn't be barefoot. His discussion is interrupted when the secretary of Lance appears and reports on something. Lance then tells Masa that he understands the importance of the knowledge he is offering. It is true that these improvements are what the city needs, but right now, they can't trust him because he has no credibility yet and has no solid collateral to give. Full of conviction, the ruler tells him that he refuses to trust someone that isn't offering a tangible asset. He needs the man to show him the results first. This might convince the villagers and him more to trust Masa. Confused by what he is saying, Masa asks if he means he should join the knights. Lance already heard that he turned down Smith's offer, so he has given up that possibility. Right now, he demands results from him, so until he shows them the fruits of his knowledge, they won't be releasing the captive demi-humans. So, he must work there until there are tangible results, or else he will be killed for lying to everyone. With this, he asks Masa again if he is still willing to negotiate when his safety is at stake. Masa agrees with full conviction, which shocks everyone. Lance accepts his decision and adds that improving the city's sanitation and the carriages will suffice. He promises that if he sees even the slightest results, then he will hand over the demi-humans to him. Seeing him stunned, he pushes the man to go over the paperwork with the librarian. Masa can't believe that the ruler is so generous with his offer. Lance tells him that they just have a difference in perspective. From his point of view, he gets to offload beast men who might start a rebellion. This is a good deal for him that even yields a profit. Besides, they share the same belief that the war only imprisons those who are weak, and it is nothing but an invasion. Masa warmly smiles at this, realizing that the leader of the city isn't corrupt at all. Lance states that he will issue a decree to gather the scattered demi-humans to free them. However, they will surely face an opposing side for doing this. He asks if Masa perhaps can think of how to deal with those who will oppose their decree. The young man excitedly thinks of a scheme. After contemplating, he proposes that he will challenge everyone who will oppose the freedom of the demi-humans to a duel. If they lose their right to complain. Lance suddenly perks up since the proposal sounds interesting to him. It would be a spectacle to watch, and it has been long since he got so entertained like this. However, the plan wouldn't be surely enough. Since they are the City of Knights, they respect the strongest, and if one defeats the strongest, he will surely be the one on top and no one will oppose his wishes. He then grabs his sword, much to Masa's surprise. Lance finds him worthy to be his opponent after he wiped out a goblin horde alone. He then raises his sword against the young man, challenging him to a duel. Masa is incredulous. He isn't sure how to fight the leader of the knights, especially seeing him so thrilled to fight him. This is what scares him, so he nonchalantly turns him down, stating that it will be troublesome if the ruler gets injured. However, Lance is already decided and commands Smith to check the arena's schedule for their duel. Without choice, Masa agrees to the duel and tells them to just inform him of the date. He then proceeds to discuss with everyone the importance of hygiene. Right away, he starts a study session on the basics like why they must keep things clean. He then tells everyone to gather people to disseminate the knowledge. With this, the knights start to gather their subordinates and leave the room. Masa looks at them with annoyance on his face, warning them if they try to run away from the lesson, they will definitely get a private lesson. Seeing the frustration on their faces, he tells off the knights that as the leaders of their city, they must be the ones to learn hygiene first, so they can be a great model to everyone. Lance praises him for being thorough and leaves the rest to him to deal with while he trains. However, he refuses to let the ruler leave the room since he needs to learn as well. Later, Masa starts his lesson on hygiene. He expounds that they should learn how to dump their wastes responsibly. Waste left in the open would attract insects and rats that bring diseases. So, to sum up his lesson, they must boil their water, cook their meat, and clean and wash regularly. The lesson is a basic human survival skill, but looking at the knights, they seem to need time to process everything. Lance is impressed that he can give a decent lesson but doubts if hygiene can change anything. Masa points out that following proper hygiene will decrease the rate of death and illness from infants to adults. Aside from this, they will be able to prevent outbreaks of the plague. Hearing this, Lance asks who he really is. In their research center, the information gathered about the possibility of the plague is scarce, meaning the value of the information about it is far too great, making their deal hardly a fair trade. Confused, Masa asks why a good deal for them sounds like a problem. The ruler tells him that owing favors doesn't sit well with him given the nature of his job. Masa looks at him with respect, thinking that he is such an honest man. He decides to stop being modest and asks if he can use the forge. He needs to improve the carriage and there are many things he wants to test. Lance gives his permission to him and will arrange it so he can use it first thing in the morning. Lance adds that while they have a proper forge, they don't have any skilled craftsmen. He elaborates that since they are on the frontier, the talented ones get snatched up by the big cities. As a result, they have a lot of materials in stock. When they visit the warehouse, Masa requests that he gather the men and anyone will do. Incredulous, he states that they are going to do a full inventory of every single material. Frustrated, he tells them that no craftsman would like to work in that kind of workshop. He mobilizes the knights and orders them to do an inventory to count the stock and how much more they need. They also have to check for damage or defects in the materials so the quality of their products won't get affected. While they are at it, they also need to clean the warehouse. Lance then gets his attention. The man tells him that as the knight order, they are capable of managing their resources just fine. Masa gets even more frustrated with his statement, because clearly, that is not the case. Things are scattered and he spots stuff covered in dust all over the place. Since he has worked at a hardware store before, disorganized things tick him off. Back home, he kept tens of thousands of items in stock. If they found out one number was off, they would spend hours to check it. Agitated, he commands the ruler to clean the back storage until spotless. Suddenly intimidated, Lance immediately agrees. Masa is now in his most serious mode and is about to show off his perfect skill in inventory control. Later, he takes charge, leading the knights to get the workshop back in order. He leads them to put things in order, get them clean, and make sure that the inventory is spotless. They spend all night finishing the task. The next morning, he is impressed by how improved and progressed the job is. He then looks at the inventory and is overwhelmed by the amount of fantasy materials on the list like black steel, vermilion ore, and mithril. He comments that there is way too much stock inside the warehouse, which is a waste for the city's finances. Unfortunately, shipments of the ore are still going even though it wasn't being used. The secretary admits that it is because of the long-term procurement deal, and so they can't stop the shipment. The contracts were already signed before they came to the city and will last for another year. Given the situation, Masa suggests that they use the ores first and process them into something usable and valuable. He has heard of tons of ores he has never even heard before, and if they play around with different ratios, they might discover some incredible alloys. Since the secretary seems confused, he explains that when they mix different materials together, they can yield different metals, like if one mixes copper and tin, they can produce bronze. Using bronze, they can create simple weapons. He even shows the man how to mix metals to produce alloys, and would love to try and make some stainless steel. The secretary starts to get really confused, so Masa thinks of a way to break it down in simpler explanation. He discusses that the ores aren't used much because they weren't strong enough as other metals. When one mixes another metal into a weak one, they can create a metal with new properties. The secretary finally understands and realizes that if the process is too complex, it would be difficult for an amateur craftsman to handle the workshop. With this information, he derives that they need someone tenured. He leaves the warehouse to process some papers and look for a craftsman. Alone, Masa wastes no time in trying out his blacksmithing skill. He checks his system status but is shocked when he discovers that he can yield a sword by just thinking about it. Given how powerful the skill is, it is pretty much a cheat skill. He then tries it to see how much detail he can make his weapon. He uses the ores inside the warehouse and turns them into iron. He smirks, knowing how valuable this skill is. From the iron, he contemplates making a small weapon first. He then sees a knife hanging on the table and decides to make one. After eyeing the forge near him, he finally moves to make himself a weapon. He has always wanted to try and make one, so he melts some iron and hammers it down to create a knife. He repeats the process until it forms into the weapon he desired. Moments later, he cools the metal in a bucket of water. Suddenly, Lance appears behind him and is amazed to see Masa forging weapons on top of the things that he can do. Masa is shocked to see him since he didn't feel his presence. The man tells him that he has been in the village since noon and came by the workshop to finish the stock check and sharpen his blade. He then asks if the young man could make a weapon better than the junk around the warehouse, and offers that he forge one for the leader to test his skills. Lately, his sword has been so dull, and no matter how many times he sharpens it, the blade is just beaten and overcast. This problem sometimes affects his duels, and he is making it through because of his great swordsmanship skills. Understanding his frustration, Masa offers to take a look at his sword and see what he can do about it. Additionally, he asks what the materials on his work desk are. Masa states that those are different kinds of components that, if they are combined, will create things that could help people in the town. The device he is working on could come in handy for lifting heavy things. Lance looks confused and has no idea how to use the device Masa is working on. Although it wasn't included in their contract, Masa wants to test and try it out. He states that he will finish and unveil the device the next day, so Lance must come and give his opinion about it. The man agrees, saying that he is curious about it anyway. With this, Masa gets back to working on his device and asks the leader to leave so he can concentrate. Lance starts to exit the workshop but looks back again. He can see that the man is so fired up and thrilled. It reminds him of the first time he took up the sword. He waves him goodbye and tells him not to overdo himself. As the night falls, Masa finally finishes the device he is working on. He went a little overboard, but doesn't mind this since he loves seeing people happy and feeling useful. Tomorrow, he will show everyone in the town the hard work he has put into realization. In addition to this, he also has to teach the folks how to use the device he has made and continue the lesson on sanitation. He is also contemplating adding a crash course on crafting. As the morning arrives, Masa wakes up to the face of a woman he is unfamiliar with. After a moment, he recognizes her as the messenger of the knights. She complains that the knights dumped all of their errands on her since they are all busy studying. She came to pass on the message and remind him of the upcoming duel he has with Lance in 3 days. He should be present at the training grounds in the morning. She comments that he is quite a brave soul to challenge a man like their ruler since Lance is truly a battle junkie. However, this could also mean that Lance is fond of him. Nevertheless, she advises that he get prepared for the duel given that it isn't going to be an easy one. She also has the medical team on standby during that duel in case he would need it. He assures her that he won't likely need the medical team and he'll be careful. She comments that the duel seems exciting and she hasn't felt this thrilled to watch a duel for a long time. Masa then remembers that he needs her help and requests that she call everyone to the town square because he needs to demonstrate something. Later, Lance and his knights are in the town square and waiting for Masa to appear. Just then, Masa exits from the well and is glad that Lance is already there. The ruler then notices that the device he was working on the night before is already installed near the well. With a cheerful voice, he requests everyone to gather closely. He mentions that he will be demonstrating drawing water from the well with the new device. This will make their lives easier, and it is also super easy to use. To start demonstrating, he calls a random female villager to try it out, emphasizing that women and even kids can use the device. First, pour some water into the pump hole. This will fill the gaps, removing the air and creating a vacuum. The vacuum pulls the water from below up into the pipe. Then, they need to move the lever up and down. The water will then start to draw out from the well into the bucket. The villagers are all in awe and liken the process to some sort of magic. Contented with the result, Masa discusses that the tool is called a pump. Since the pioneer pump is successful, he plans to install them in the main town as well to make use of them. Next, he also plans to improve the carriage, since it is really medieval the last time he used it, and this will affect the trade. Masa inspects the bottom part of the carriage and sees that it is just a box with a metal axle running through the base and wheels attached. To improve the carriage, the passenger area needs to be separated from the wheels. A frame must be added on top, and the seating section should be suspended from it. After that, springs will be installed at the front and back. Seeing his confused expression, Masa explains that he only knows the basics and will need to test the vibration mechanism to see if it works. He starts by building the base. Using his advanced knowledge, he creates a blueprint, smooths the wood, and attaches the parts together until the body of the carriage finally takes shape. Once the first prototype is completed, he asks the leader to ride the carriage since he has already run out of mana. They attach it to a horse, and another knight drives it for testing. As the carriage moves, Lance finds it impressive since it barely shakes compared to his old one. The ride is not perfectly smooth, but it is comfortable and far better than before. Masa explains that he added a shock absorber suspension, something no carriage in their city currently has. With this design, the left and right wheels are linked by a single axle through springs. He also mentions that he can experiment with independent suspension, where each wheel moves and operates on its own. There are several types he could test in the future. On top of that, he plans to make the passenger section large enough to carry around 9 to 10 people. Lance is thrilled to hear this, as traveling during expeditions will become much easier. Masa agrees, noting that they need to consistently introduce new technology to make breakthroughs in their everyday lives and make things easier to manage. Hearing about the improved carriage, other knights volunteer to try it and see how comfortable it is. While the others are busy testing it, Masa calls Lance into the workshop to show him the other tools he has made. He promises to teach the craftsman how to repair them. Sensing that Masa wants to discuss something else, Lance urges him to speak openly. Masa comments that the commander is sharp and admits that they need fairness in their negotiations. Lance agrees and asks what Masa desires in return for helping the village so much, especially since many of the improvements were not included in their contract. Masa states straightforwardly that he wants to form a pact banning invasions between beastfolk and humans. Additionally, he asks to receive some of their surplus ore. Lance pauses for a moment, clearly contemplating the conditions. After a brief silence, he agrees, and Masa breathes a sigh of relief. With this, a treaty that will provide mutual benefits for both sides will be formed. As long as it does not interfere with their daily lives, Lance will permit it. However, he warns that other countries may not do the same, so the young man must remain cautious. Masa thanks him and calls him an honorable person. Lance bids him goodbye and tells him to give everything he has in their upcoming duel, saying that he expects a great battle. The comment sends a chill through Masa, knowing he is about to face a true battle maniac. Still, Masa is grateful that the negotiations with Lance have gone smoothly so far. It is only a verbal promise for now, but he believes that Lance is an honest man who will stand by his word. Exhausted, Masa decides to call it a day and rest to replenish his lost mana. Just then, the secretary appears and reminds him about the hygiene lecture, noting that everyone is waiting. More knights soon arrive, seeking his guidance on the new inventions he introduced to the village. After attending to everyone's needs, Masa is finally able to rest after the exhausting day. Spent, he lies down on his bed and realizes how tiring it is to teach people who do not even know the basics. He remembers his days working at a home improvement center, where instructors patiently taught him until he became certified. He suddenly wonders how everyone back home is doing. Masa opens his window and reminisces about the person he misses the most. However, she no longer shares the same sky or the same moon with him. If only he could tell her directly how he feels, and that he has given up on love if it is not with her. Mari appears, feeling guilty about his longing. She listens as he laments about wanting to give up on love and wishing he could have said goodbye. He tries to downplay his feelings, likening his experience to a poem about love that he once read years ago. It is tragic, but he is slowly learning to accept it. Curious, Mari asks what kind of person the woman was. Masa describes her as petite and adorably sweet. He confesses that for him, it was love at first sight. When they first met, she was working incredibly hard, and he fell for her tenacity. A few months later, he told her that he liked her. He was not good at expressing his feelings, so his words came out clumsy. That was when he learned that she had already been with someone else for years. After that, he left home. Despite everything, he remained hung up on her, but he still managed to congratulate her on her wedding day. What makes it strange is that he later met a girl in the rabbit folk village who shared the same name. Her name was May, and seeing her shocked him, causing memories of his past to resurface. Noticing Mari's guilt, Masa reassures her that he is fine. He tells her that he has a new goal in life now, and that focusing on it feels refreshing compared to dwelling on the life he left behind. If anything, he is grateful to Mari for giving him a new purpose. Returning to her usual self, Mari agrees. After all, she is a goddess, and he was brought into this world specifically for his role. Masa looks at her, annoyed by her boastful tone, but notices the warm smile on her face. He used to think she was just a lousy goddess, but now he finds himself thinking that she is actually a cool one. Hearing the compliment, she smiles again. The sight makes Masa happy and gives him renewed energy to return to work. He bids her goodbye. As Masa resumes his tasks, Mari looks at the moon with a content smile on her face. 3 days pass. Masa is busy teaching, sharing, and spreading what he knows. His spare time, meanwhile, is all spent preparing for battle. Finally, the day of the duel with Lance arrives. Masa heads for the arena and is surprised to see so many people entering. He goes to the waiting room, where Lance is, to ask him about it. Lance is impressed that his opponent has actually shown up. Masa says he never expected to be the center of attention in the middle of a festival. Lance explains that his subordinates simply want to see him use his sword. He then looks longingly at Masa's newly forged sword and asks if there is one for him as well. Masa replies that no one hands out custom blades for a duel. Lance then takes out a black greatsword, saying he will enjoy the duel to the fullest. Masa sees that it is forged from tougher ore, but the craftsmanship is about the same as the loner blade. Lance then asks his opponent about his own weapon. Masa draws his brand new sword. Lance smiles and says that once he wins, that new sword will be the talk of the night. Masa, in turn, smirks and says he will try to hold back as much as he can. Lance remarks that the last person who dared to talk to him like that learned their lesson the hard way. This makes Masa nervous, and he asks if Lance has any experience losing. The knight smiles and says, "Not anymore." Masa replies that all his careful preparation might have been pointless. Lance reminds him that Masa once wiped out a whole goblin horde, a feat not many can pull off. He adds that he wants his opponent to come at him with everything he has. Masa smiles to show that he understands. The two then walk out of the room together and enter the arena, where they are greeted by loud cheers from the massive crowd. Masa looks around, feeling a bit overwhelmed, and spots the messenger officer sitting in a rather fancy section. She smiles at him as the two fighters square off. A host then declares that the battle between them may begin. The referee explains that the fight will be one round, winner takes all. The crowd looks on in anticipation. Victory will be decided when one fighter surrenders or can no longer fight. Finally, they are instructed to keep it clean, and the clash begins. The messenger girl asks an aide what he thinks of the fight so far. He calls her Milady, a title she does not like. She remarks that Masa does not even look like a warrior. They assume he might have a trick up his sleeve and guess that the fight will depend on its effectiveness. The two fighters continue to clash swords. Lance says he did not expect a human could match his strength. Masa asks if that means they can just agree he has won. Lance laughs, then makes a different strike, forcing Masa to take a step back. He uses his foot to sweep the blacksmith off balance. Masa falls backward as Lance moves in. He sees the knight's sword coming down at him and avoids it at the last moment. His face fills with fear as he asks if Lance is trying to kill him. Lance figures from his stance that he must have had some training. He continues to attack, noting that the young man's techniques are crude. Masa blocks one attack with the hilt of his sword. Lance compliments him but keeps on the offensive, while Masa desperately tries to avoid each hit. He realizes real combat is very different. He remembers that Mari said he could fight a whole kingdom, but with the way he is floundering now, that seems impossible. However, he has now confirmed what he needed for his plan. He decides now is the time to make his best move. The experience he gained at the rural station, everything he learned, all the lessons the artisans taught him, all will be put to use. He raises his hand and activates the skill, item box storage space. Lance braces for an attack, but instead, large logs rain down on the arena. The knight is surprised. There was no report of Masa having a rare skill. He still has no idea what the blacksmith is thinking. Is he planning to use the logs as footing? Lance stands in the center of the debris. Masa sees his chance. He uses multi-skill activation to cast woodworking and architecture. The pieces of wood suddenly transform into multiple siege engines, their battering rams all pointed at Lance. Lance is stunned to see himself surrounded by siege weapons. Masa is pleased, as one perk of crafting skills is that he can build what he pictures in his mind. However, with his current skill level and mana, he can still only make basic tools. Still, he hopes a multi-strike assault will work. Lance now sees what the hidden move was. He swings his sword in broad strokes, slicing through the machines. The messenger watches with a curious look. Lance, Meanwhile, is disappointed if this is all there is. He sees that Masa is trying to keep his distance to craft more items, so he decides to crush that opening with one decisive step. The messenger now looks worried and gets to her feet. Lance moves forward to end the fight but is shocked to see that Masa now has a giant crossbow. He realizes that this was the blacksmith's plan all along. He must have built it beforehand, and now Lance is trapped. The arrow is released, and the knight knows he cannot avoid it. He raises his sword and meets the arrow head-on. There is a massive impact as Lance struggles with all his might. He is finally able to deflect the arrow with his sword, leaving the audience impressed. However, he is exhausted from the effort and sees that Masa is taking this chance to charge at him. Lance is too tired to defend himself. He can barely move his arms. Still, he figures he has a chance if he can force a lockup and pin Masa down. He raises his sword just enough to block Masa's attack. To his surprise, his great sword cracks from the impact and shatters. The proud knight falls back to the ground, defenseless, as Masa stands over him, victorious. Lance realizes this was Masa's plan from the start. He was certain his blade would be able to cut through the great sword. Masa smiles and replies that he only felt confident after he saw the edge chip on Lance's sword. He had actually tested it earlier on the one Lance had lent him, but since it was made of different material than the sword Lance used in the duel, it was still a gamble. So, he had to figure out how to buy time and ensure Lance would take his strike. That's why he used the battering rams and the giant bow. Masa admits he never thought Lance would slice the arrow instead of dodging it. However, that caused Lance to freeze just long enough for Masa to ready his blade. Lance is impressed that the blacksmith challenged him not with sword skill, but with craftsmanship. Masa says that's all he can do. As he activates his storage skill, he takes out a brand new sword and explains he couldn't hand it over before their duel. He holds it high and offers it to Lance, smiling as he calls it a token of gratitude. Lance is left speechless. Masa also acknowledges that he now stands no chance against the knight. Lance swings the new sword a few times to test it, looking genuinely happy and thankful. He then tells Masa that he lives to fight. Each battle is a thrill. No matter the weapon, every bout teaches him something new and reminds him why he is alive. As a result, like-minded people gathered around him, and that made him keep swinging his sword even more. Then one day, he looked back and realized no one could match him. He adds that it's strange since the stronger he got, the less he actually fought. Before he knew it, he was running an entire organization and got stuck waging invasions. That's why today felt so refreshing. He hadn't had this much fun in ages. He then tells Masa not to say he can't win just because he gave him a new sword. Winning a fight means growth, which means Lance will grow, too. Lance says that next time, Masa should beat the future Lance, who will be even stronger, and adds that he's looking forward to their rematch. Masa says he'd rather not, but acknowledges they will cross blades again. Lance then declares Masa the winner as the crowd watches on. He adds that they will fulfill their promise and proclaims the beastfolk slaves free from this day forth. Later that evening, in the Knight's Quarter Tavern, guests enjoy their meals. One man, Eldam, mentions he never thought a production-type skill could shine so well in battle. He then asks Smith if he's ever considered training under a carpenter. Eldam laughs and states that Masa has a lot of skills under his belt. Smith keeps praising Masa, but Eldam grows nervous when he notices Lance, standing right behind them, hearing every word. They turn, stunned to see the knight. Both look at him nervously, but he tells them to calm down, explaining he's actually there to talk to them. He asks if they were the ones who brought Masa to the city. The Masa he fought and the one in the reports were vastly different and requests they tell him everything they know about the blacksmith. Some time later, Lance has been fully briefed. The knight realizes the young blacksmith is far beyond his expectations. Smith remarks that if those stats belonged to someone at level 60 to 70, he could believe it. Yet Masa is only level 16, and his stats rival Smith's, who is level 62. Lance now understands why they didn't share this information earlier. Smith suggests they should recruit such a talented individual into the Knights. Lance counters that in Masa's case, it would be more interesting to let him roam free. He adds that, though they promised a rematch, it would be a shame to sever their ties here. Lance starts to give an order, but before he can finish, the messenger arrives. She says he just wants a reason to keep tabs on Masa. Lance is surprised and asks why she's here. She replies that she got roped into being a messenger, adding that there are too many skilled folk lying idle as we learn that Lance is her uncle. A few days later, Masa is at the council hall's main entrance, wondering if he can finally head home now that the beast folk are free. Lance comes out and says it's fine, the reforms are already showing results, and once the beast folk gather, they will send word to their village. Masa says he understands, but then asks why the knight is covered in bruises and who he brawled with this time. Lance replies that he couldn't exactly fight back. Someone kicks the knight from behind and states that it was she who threw the first punch. Masa is surprised to see that it is the messenger. Lance explains she is his niece, Adel, who is as fiery as they come. Adel says she is happy to meet him and will do everything to be useful since she is tagging along today. Masa is confused, as he had no idea she would be joining. Lance explains that Adel wants to see more of the world, and he is worried since it is dangerous for a woman to travel alone. Masa thinks that once the beast folk return, they will need more hands to expand the village, but a remote village is no place for a city girl to live. Adel insists she will manage just fine, walking closer to him and saying it actually sounds like fun. Masa laughs and sees that Lance's blood definitely runs in her veins. He agrees that if she will lend a hand, it won't be a problem, but warns her uncle to be prepared since it could be years before they return. This catches the knight by surprise as he asks what Masa means, and Masa explains they will be developing the settlement into a proper town to make it safe for the beastskin. Lance looks hesitant, but Adel is determined and tells him not to stop her. The tired knight relents and asks Masa to protect her, which makes Adel yell at him for being overprotective. Lance's face then softens as he bids them goodbye, and Masa promises that once things settle down, or if the situation becomes too hard, he will be back, waving to the knights as he and Adel set off. Masa reflects on how his journey turned out to be longer than expected, but he was able to resolve the issues and even secure plenty of resources. He and Adel travel through numerous locations, camping out at night and enjoying the scenery as they go, eventually reaching their destination. Masa is pleased that, on top of everything, he now has a powerful ally at his side. He greets the rabbit folk and spends the next few moments bringing them up to date, knowing they will also have to figure out what comes next. For now though, he is glad to be back and just wants to enjoy the reunion. Mari watches it all while sipping tea, smiling happily as the screen shows that the world development bonus has been granted. Masa discusses with the chief the possibility of setting aside their grudges with the humans for the future. The chief worries that now that Masa's technology is fueling human advancement, they might become even more dangerous. Masa assures him there is no need to worry, as he has already spoken with their commander. He suggests they focus on expanding the settlement, now that many of their beastfolk kin are free, and he stands up to declare his vision. He wants to build a beastfolk city. The next morning, May and Adel wake Masa in his tent. The two girls complain that he is still not ready, especially since he was the one who said he had a big announcement to give. They head out first but urge Masa not to be late to the announcement spot. Masa is still groggy and first checks his status screen to review the skills he can use for city building. He is surprised to see a new message. He presses it and discovers that Mari's sister, Era, has written to him. He has been rewarded with more skills due to his contributions to their world, and she hopes he can make their world an even better place for future generations. With the discovery of Era, Masa now realizes there is a whole pantheon of gods. He is glad to know there is a god who seems more responsible than Mari, a sentiment the goddess resents. He concludes that if he keeps accomplishing things, he will receive even more skill upgrades, so he takes his time reviewing all his new skills. Adel and May come back to yell at him for not trying to get up faster. Later, Masa goes to the gathering spot and tells the beastfolk he wants to discuss the future of their settlement. He explains that now that other beastfolk are free from the humans, their population will triple, and they will need to improve their food situation, protective walls, and other amenities. He announces that he plans to build a town near theirs. The rabbit people question whether they can build a town on their own and ask what kind of town he envisions. Masa answers that he will make sure they can do it, and that he wants a town where beastfolk can live safe, happy, and free. His declaration makes everyone smile, and all the people instantly agree to help him. Masa can see they trust him without question and feels guilty. He shares with them, in a serious tone, that he can no longer hide who he is if they continue to trust him so completely. He reveals that he came from another world and was brought into theirs by a god. The people fall silent, making Masa think his story is hard to believe, but then, many begin asking questions about what kind of world he came from and what kind of god he met. Adel admits his story checks out, given how different he seems in culture and knowledge. Masa asks everyone how they can believe him so quickly, and they tell him it is easy to believe when gods are involved. Masa realizes that a story like his is easily accepted in a world where gods are commonplace. The chief also tells him their trust will never waver, as he stood up and protected them. This makes Masa glad to see he is loved, though now the people won't stop hounding him for more details about his world, much to his annoyance. Masa quiets the eager crowd by promising to share all about his world over dinner, then turns everyone's attention to the work ahead. He explains they must begin clearing fields and expanding their tents, and he assigns each person a task. Adel and May watch him expectantly, waiting for their own roles, and grow visibly annoyed when he hesitates. Finally, he asks them to produce slaked lime, calling it the secret weapon of construction and a job he can trust to no one else, a responsibility that satisfies even Adel's pride. Masa shows them the kiln and cooking tools they'll need, instructing them to place seashells inside, add firewood beneath, and light the fire. He points to a bellows box beside the kiln, explaining that pumping it pushes air through a pipe and blasts oxygen into the furnace, raising the heat to 1,000 degrees. When the girls look puzzled, he clarifies that water boiling with bubbles means 100 degrees, and clay glowing red hot means about 1,000. He urges them to use this knowledge of heat responsibly and with safety in mind, reminding them that technology can bring happiness or misery, so they must always think before they act. He asks them to be careful with the techniques they learn from him, whether they succeed or not. Mei asks if it's okay to fail, and Masa pats both girls on the head, as he reassures them that failure is part of learning and that they must also learn the right way to use technology. Adel and Mei's faces glow with the trust he's placed in them. Masa announces they should start heating the furnace and guides them through the initial steps before leaving to clear the land for the new town. At the site, he builds a blocked, flat flooring area, exhausting himself and working up a sweat. He estimates it will take 6 hours for his mana to recover and realizes that, at this rate, leveling all the land for the town will take days. The thought of such exhausting repetition horrifies him, and he begins searching for another solution. His eyes land on the nearby cliff, and he remembers the time he spent with Mei and the rabbit folk below it, which gives him an idea. A smile spreads across his face as he runs toward the cliff's edge, and below, he sees the slimes in view. Masa brings a slime to the village, announcing that he plans to keep it there much to everyone's concern. The chief questions his reasoning, pointing out that slimes are monsters. Masa explains that he wants to use it to process sewage and food waste while also studying its nature. He mentions having seen documents in Portalum stating that some monsters can coexist with humans, and he believes they can be used as resources, much like wood or stone. Privately, Masa does not voice his idea of building toilets using the slime. The chief is impressed by the concept of utilizing monsters as a resource. Masa elaborates that he wants to observe how much the slime can consume and establish safe handling methods, and he shares his additional plan to raise giant lizards to address their food situation. After considering the proposal, the chief agrees to let Masa keep the slime in the village, delighting him. Over the following days, Masa studies the slime and discovers it cannot climb higher than its own body height. He experiments by feeding it grass and wood, observing that it slowly absorbs and dissolves them. After several days of the same diet, he notices that while it continues to eat and digest the materials, it seems to grow tired of them. Based on these results, he concludes that the slime should have no problem digesting food waste. One day, a rabbit folk alerts Masa that the slime is not moving. Worried, Masa rushes to his pet and picks it up, finding it shriveled and stiff. He realizes it has become too dry and needs water. After placing it in a pond, the little creature revives. Later, rabbit folk bring more slimes for large-scale breeding experiments. From all his observations, Masa forms a hypothesis. Slimes are the world's self-cleaning mechanism, based on his finding that they decompose only impurities in dirty water. Through his slime pet, Masa feels the joy of discovery. One day, Mei asks if she can keep a slime as a pet. Masa hesitates, struggling to explain that slimes, while useful, are still potentially dangerous monsters. Reluctantly, he tells her she cannot keep one. Later, Masa informs the chief that he must leave the village again, having calculated that they will soon run out of timber and other materials. The chief agrees to let him go and even offers additional help if needed. Masa tells the chief that he has asked the gathering team to collect tree saplings and seeds because they need to plant them, explaining that while trees take years to grow, they can be cut down in an instant, so they must prepare for the future by giving something back to the forest and the mountains to maintain a rich environment, since they are the ones using its wood. The chief and Adel are impressed that he is always thinking 10 steps ahead. Masa instructs them to focus on fruit-bearing trees and to grow them to waist height in the village before planting them in the mountains. The chief asks when Masa will be heading out, and Masa reports that he will leave as soon as he is ready, making it clear he is going alone, fully aware that Adel plans to accompany him. The next morning, Mei and Adel meet Masa at the village exit to travel with him. Mei defends her need to come due to her knowledge of herbs and plants, while Adel insists she won't stay behind when she can broaden her horizons with him. The girls join forces, declaring they are coming even if he says no, and Masa reluctantly agrees, under the condition that they follow his instructions. As they walk through the forest, Masa explains that their task is not only to collect wood but also stone and other materials, specifically seeds and saplings they can eat or use for medicine, emphasizing his desire to grow them since they must live in harmony with nature no matter the cost. When the girls wonder why he thinks this way, he explains that humans in his world developed so much that many living things went extinct, teaching him that it is not good for humans to be too powerful, and in his second chance at life, he wants to live as if everything is precious to this world. The girls call him cheesy but feel joy seeing him uphold such ideals, making them excited to discover new things on their journey. Later, Adel gathers stacks of huge logs and realizes Masa has disappeared from sight. May informs her that Masa went elsewhere, making Adel wonder how far the man is willing to go to cut wood. May then hears the sound of a sword being swung in the distance with her rabbit ears, and they walk toward the sound, where they see Masa beheading a giant monster and its head flying off its body and hurtling toward Adel. Adel catches the head with her hands, freezing in disgust, and later, white with bruises from Adel's retaliatory hits, Masa apologizes and explains that the giant monster attacked him. May, amazed, identifies it as a worm, and Masa informs her they have similar creatures in his world that enrich soil and help plants grow. Noticing no nearby holes to suggest digging, Masa is puzzled, but Adel explains that the worm uses earth magic to travel underground without leaving holes behind, intriguing Masa with the idea of magic using worms. May adds that she has heard worms can be used to make high-end bows, with their elastic and strong tendons serving as bowstrings and armor material. Masa asks if this means people might come to the forest hunting worms, but Adel doubts it, since very few can take one down, both girls staring at Masa as if he's unusual, while May cheerfully remarks it's not surprising for her big brother to defeat a giant monster. Masa considers how to use the worm for materials and whether hunting might become routine, prompting May to share that rabbit folk hunt monsters like giant lizards and eat birds called holo, volunteering to listen for the bird with her ears. Instead, she hears the sound of a vicious beast and is so terrified she breaks down screaming. They ask what's wrong, but she continues crying, and Masa recalls how scared she was when they first met, realizing she's even more frightened now. May grabs him, begging him not to go looking for the monster, and through tears warns he will die if he fights it. Masa assures her he won't fight it but says he still needs to look at the beast to know what they're dealing with. May makes him promise to come right back, and after agreeing, she points him in the direction of the sound. Masa runs toward it and hides behind a tree to avoid being seen by the monster, where he spots a four-armed bear eating a giant purple horse, a sight that rattles even the mighty Masa. Masa hides in fear, watching the bear continue to eat its prey before it finally leaves, leaving him relieved. He reflects that he has never seen a monster like it before. Examining the corpse of the horse, he notes it is just as abnormally huge, with 6 legs, and appraises it as an assault savanna horse, a mutant species that evolved from a horse that accumulated an abnormal amount of magic power, making him wonder where it got such a source. He then considers what he might learn about the bear, but suddenly a drop of water falls on his nose, and a second later it begins to rain. Realizing he and the girls must return to the village to warn the chief about the bear, they hurry back. There, the chief tells Masa they have encountered the demon bear, explaining it, like the giant horse, has mutated due to mana and is spotted every few years, its strength and attitude akin to a natural disaster. The chief expresses relief that luck was on their side, as the bear likely sensed the coming rain. Adel voices fear that the bear might return, but the chief reassures her, noting it is already the rainy season, when the demon bear becomes less active, and paints a picture of the lowlands flooding and grasslands turning into a vast lake. Inspired, Masa asks if the watery environment means sea creatures will migrate to the area, and the chief confirms that aquatic creatures become active. Masa stands up to leave, making the chief think he intends to find and fight the bear, but Masa exclaims he is already sick of repetitive food and wants to collect sea creatures while the opportunity is hot. Rushing outside in a hurry, he sees the forest fields now filled with water puddles and gets excited. As he walks around, he almost trips, looking down at the puddle and suspecting something must have tried to pull him in. Suddenly, a giant green crab rises from the water and tries to grab Masa with its claw, but Masa effortlessly seizes the claw and lifts the creature up. He pulls a rope from his spatial storage and ties the crab so it can't move. Using his appraisal ability, he identifies it as a blue crab that turns bright emerald green when wet. Masa feels lucky to be in a place where he can find aquatic creatures so easily and grows excited at how many more he might discover. He proceeds to catch a variety of creatures from green, moss, crayfish, and poison toads to a stealth python, and, after gathering what he can, drools at the thought of the village finally having something new to eat. Mari suddenly appears behind him, startling the man. Masa asks what she's doing out on a rainy day, and she reveals she can't get wet thanks to her divine barrier. She explains she appeared out of curiosity about why he was suddenly hunting aquatic creatures, and Masa realizes the goddess has never eaten seafood before. Proudly, he tells her these are ingredients he couldn't ignore, and a curious Mari asks if they're really delicious. Seeing her intrigue, Masa grabs her hand to take her somewhere they can share a snack. He builds a temporary hut to give them shelter from the rain, then pulls the blue crab from his storage space, suggesting they try it. Mari is skeptical about eating it, so Masa asks her to sit while he prepares their snack. As the goddess watches him ready his cooking utensils, his hair wet from the rain, she grabs a towel and places it on his head, gently wiping it dry and asking him not to move so she can finish. Masa remarks he never knew she could be so kind, prompting Mari to slap him lightly with the towel, blushing as she tells him to stay still by the fire and warm up. She adds that he should consider it a reward for working so hard in the village and coastal city. They continue in a comfortable silence, both blushing and stealing glances at each other. Masa sets a dish of boiled crab on the table, and Mari admits it looks better than she expected, though Masa, still awkward about the towel whipping, can only manage a quiet, "Right." Mari tries to pull the shell from a leg, but it's too hard for her. Masa shows her the trick, pulling the limb horizontally so the meat slides out. After trying it herself, Mari takes a bite, and her face lights up at the delicious flavor. She praises the perfect balance of richness and sweetness. They share another awkward glance before returning to their meal. Once satisfied, Mari asks when she can take a crab home to her sister, Era. Masa remembers she's referring to the goddess who messaged him earlier. He offers her the leftover crab but warns it won't taste as good cold. Mari praises him again for his ability to make anything, saying she never tires of watching him cook, craft tools, and forge swords. Masa reminds her she was the one who gave him the skills, but she clarifies she's impressed by the knowledge and ideas that make his application of them special. He explains it's because he worked at a home center, where he had to be a jack of all trades, a rural home center on a massive lot, open from early morning until late night, opening especially early during planting season to accommodate farmers. He describes studying how to handle and prepare seedlings for flowers, trees, and vegetables, listing the variety of skills he needed, including explaining everything to customers, and complains stressfully about having to do whatever the manager said, especially when understaffed. Mari sees from his panicked expression that he had a rough life, but she tells him it's still great that all those skills are coming in handy now. Masa regrets that they'll need to deal with the demon bear before they can continue building the town for the beast folk, admitting he came out looking for ingredients partly as an excuse to run away from his problems. Saddened, Mari stands and tells him she will never allow him to run away, adding that he has done so well for this world that she hates seeing him in a moment of weakness. He smiles and asks what she'll do if he tries to run, and she replies she'd never forgive him. Masa laughs at her attempt to look serious, embarrassing the goddess, then says he can't be a coward if a goddess says so, asking her to sit back and watch him take care of the demon bear. Masa returns to the village, where the rabbit folk report that the wall at the entrance is almost finished. Inspecting their work, he is pleased to see its stability and how it's beginning to resemble a formidable fortress, and he encourages them to keep up the good work. Surveying the preparations to protect them from the demon bear, Masa feels they are progressing well, though he wishes he had more time to level up. That night, while reviewing his skills, he is disappointed that most of his new ones are not battle-related. He tells May they need more firepower to face the demon bear, and she asks if he means fire magic, recalling that Foxkin are skilled in magic and wondering if any of those returning might be magic users. Masa considers asking Lance about finding a Foxkin to teach him, but Adel interjects that beastfolk with magical aptitude are rare. Reflecting, Masa realizes he hasn't seen anyone use magic since arriving in this world, and asks Adel how many people in the city can wield it. She can only think of one or two, growing angry at the thought that Mari misled him by describing a world where sword and magic clashed. Suddenly, Masa hears a sound and checks his status screen, discovering a new message. Adel and May are amazed, seeing a status screen for the first time, and Masa explains the goddess gave it to him, admitting he also thinks it's cool. He reads the message from Era, which explains that this world is still finding its footing in magic and science. While some monsters use magic as a natural trait, humans, beastmen, demons, and dwarves have yet to decipher its principles, and she looks forward to Masa's efforts to advance magic in the world. Intrigued by her expectation that he spread magic, Adel asks if he can even use it, and he casually replies that he can only use healing magic, a statement that leaves both girls staring at him in amazement. Masa wonders if the goddess means for him to teach magic, worrying he doesn't understand its principles enough to qualify, but then realizes what he must do: build a facility for learning. He declares that he needs to open a school. Masa tells May and Adel that a school in his world is a knowledge-learning facility. Adel imagines that his world must be filled with knowledge and technology far beyond theirs. Masa pulls out a cell phone from his storage space and proudly shows it to the girls as an example of his world's technology. The girls can't comprehend how the tiny box is supposed to be the pride of his world. Masa turns the cell phone on and is surprised to see that it is still active. He wonders if this means time stops in his storage space. He tells the girls that his device lets them talk to people from faraway lands. He continues to say that it can take photos, record videos, and let them listen to tens of thousands of songs. He tells them more, overwhelming the girls. He shows them how it works by taking a photo of the girls together. He plays music, plays video games, and uses the calculator to show them how to count numbers with it. The next thing Masa knows, it is already nighttime, and he just realized that he wasted the day having fun with his phone. He refocuses on thinking about how he can teach magic when he has no detailed knowledge of it himself. He wonders why the goddess, Era, wants him to do this. Thinking about the goddesses gives him an idea. He mischievously asks out loud how magic works. As he expects, Mari comes out of a portal to tell him how to use magic. The goddess then realizes that she got tricked into being summoned. Mari explains that healing magic is different from the others, and that he has only performed magic once, when he made his final strike on Lance in their duel. She explains that he subconsciously imbued his sword with magic, which made it stronger. Masa remembers using what he thought was magic on himself and bandits, so Mari assures him that he only used skill back then. She explains that gods grant skills, and that they manifest according to how the recipient imagines them. She explains that Masa uses his skills according to his knowledge of home improvement and games. She says that true healing magic requires medical knowledge, and that recovery takes time even with that. Masa realizes that this is the reason all his skills are tailored to his knowledge set. He asks now how he can use magic like he did in the duel. Mari reminds him how he can feel the magic flowing through his body when using a skill, and that he even ran out of mana once. She advises him to imagine mana as his energy source, and that he needs to let it flow while picturing a phenomenon he wants to create and then amplifying and manifesting it. From her explanation, Masa is confident that he can pull it off. He asks if it is okay for her to explain this much, since it can be seen as a major interference. Mari says it's fine, but her scared face makes it obvious that she worries Hesti will lecture her. Masa grins as he tells Mari that she just can't stop worrying about him. The goddess punches him for his cockiness and tells him not to push his luck. She admits with an embarrassed face that she is just helping out Era. Masa smiles at her and praises her for being a good big sister. After talking to Mari, Masa added studying magic to his daily routine. Meanwhile, life in the village resumes peacefully now that the anti-bear defenses are complete. Masa feels they wasted a lot of time since the demon bear never showed up anyway. While Adel tells him the bear not coming is the best outcome, Masa still worries this just means the bear will come next year. May thinks the most important thing is that the village is safe. The chief agrees, and is at least glad they gained some useful arrows from the experience. Masa recalls that he means the arrows he made, which he added barbs to. He grins smugly at the thought of how hard the barbs are to pull out and how they are coated with poison. The chief tells Masa the hunting squad loves his arrows and shows them practicing on the firing range. He remembers the bows they are using are made from the tree monster. Masa asks the squad how the bows strung with worm tendon are performing. The squad falls into awkward silence, unsure what to tell him. They explain that the strings are strong, but even their strongest villagers can't draw them properly, so they go unused. The villager holding one asks Masa to demonstrate. Masa takes the bow, aims, and fires with extreme speed. The arrow shoots so fast it shatters the target and pierces the tree behind it. Masa realizes he accidentally coated the arrow with boost magic. He tries not to worry, telling himself the arrow will eventually stop. They then hear the scream of a wild beast. The watchtower sounds the alarm, announcing movement near the northern cliff. They declare the appearance of the demon bear. Everyone prepares for evacuation. Masa tries to excuse what he did as a total accident. The chief tries to remain calm and reminds everyone they prepared for this. He tells Masa they can handle it. With conviction, Masa agrees. He asks the chief to coordinate evacuations while he instructs the fighters to get to their positions. He then orders the hunting squad to follow him to confront the demon bear. Adel and May worry for Masa, but he pats their heads and tells them the village is in their hands. Masa then leads the hunting squad as they rush toward the danger. Adel assures May that Masa will be fine. The rabbit girl answers that she believes in her big brother. The two girls stand tall and yell for Masa to do his best. Meanwhile, Masa is hiding behind bushes as he watches the demon bear wreak havoc among the trees. He is nervous to see the bear, which is now wounded in its left eye, looking incredibly furious. He signals the hunting squad positioned on the cliff above to get ready. Masa plans to lure the demon bear directly beneath the cliff, so the hunters can fire down on it. He tells himself that if he fails to draw the bear to the right spot, it will mean his death and the village's destruction. Masa raises his hands, signaling the archers to take aim. They fire, trapping the bear in a barrage of raining arrows. While the bear is distracted, Masa slashes at it, but the beast doesn't seem to feel the attack. Instead, it looks directly at Masa. Masa then runs, trying to lure the bear toward him. It quickly catches up, and Masa blocks its fast strikes with his sword, growing overwhelmed. Just as its claws are about to hit him, the bear suddenly jerks in pain and stops attacking. Masa realizes the poison from the arrows is taking effect, relieved it's working better than he expected. The archers fire another volley, and Masa runs as fast as he can while the bear is distracted. The bear bears the brunt of the arrows until it finally goes down. The hunting squad cheers their victory. Masa approaches the bear with disbelief that they actually won, checking his status window to see if his EXP increased, and is glad to see he gained a massive level up. Just as he thinks they can return home in peace, Masa takes a closer look at the bear's face and realizes its fur markings are different from the bear he saw before. He warns one of his hunting squad members not to come any closer. Just as he states this isn't the bear he originally encountered, he fails to notice that another demon bear is already behind him. The others cry out in fear for Masa's safety. Masa is struck by the demon bear's paw, his ribs crushed by the impact. The force sends him flying, shattering multiple trees in his path. Gasping for breath, he tries to rise and looks down at his side. Not only is his armor broken, but the skin beneath is dark red and swelling. The bear closes in, looming closer with each step. Masa attempts to stand, but the pain from his wound is too severe. The bear swipes trees aside as it advances. An archer fires an arrow, but the bear catches it barehanded, then shifts its attention to the rabbit folk on the cliff above. Seizing the distraction, Masa draws his bow and fires, injuring one of the bear's limbs. He smiles defiantly and tells the bear he can still fight. The hunting squad watches in horror, certain Masa is about to be killed. Masa slowly rises, channeling healing magic into his wounds as he staggers forward. He runs as fast as his body allows, convinced he still has a chance if he can reach a certain place. But the bear catches up before he can get far, striking him again and again. Masa struggles to keep moving until he's cornered, his strength nearly gone. He can feel his healing magic faltering, and he can't focus enough to sustain it. With the bear standing over him, he believes his end has come. Masa regrets dying just when he's found people he wants to protect. He closes his eyes, accepting his fate. Then his eyes snap open. The bear is being struck by a melee weapon wielded by Adel, each blow carrying enormous destructive power. The girl shouts at the beast, declaring she